I did my PhD in statistics at Ohio State, so this new quickly emerging field and growing field really intrigued me. It's about as warm and fuzzy as statistical analysis will get. So really happy to be in the space. Today I'm going to talk about sort of all these fancy, snazzy buzzwords that people are throwing around lately. Homomorphic encryption, data clean rooms, differential privacy, data anonymization. There's a lot of jargon, and not all of it is terribly clear. Most of it isn't. And recently, there have been some serious noise in the media over from big asshole tech. I wish Arvind was here, but big asshole tech, like the Apples, the Googles, the Facebooks, they've all been basically, they've been in the news for obviously lots of reasons, but now they're sort of trying to clean up their act and, cover their asses again. I'm going to look at specifically Facebook has launched this huge campaign to present to you all of the wonderful privacy enhancing technology that they're using to protect your highly sensitive and personal data. But what exactly are they guaranteeing us? There's no such thing as a free lunch, especially in privacy. Specifically, it's a balance. Privacy is implementing privacy is a balance between the utility of the data and how much protection you're going to offer the individuals who produced it. So what I'm going to talk about is the war that's now ensuing between among big asshole tech, and what that means for the future of the internet and all of our data. I'm going to pick a specific privacy enhancing technology, a PET, differential privacy. It's been in the media a ton. What the hell does it mean? It was developed in academia a long time ago, but it's just now sort of getting its wings. And we'll look closely at the big asshole tech promises that they're sort of peddling on. It's a gorgeous website that Facebook has stood up. So we'll take a look at that. But specifically, we're going to take a look at the limits of differential privacy, where it's good, where it should be used, and how many people, including big asshole tech, is sort of pressing the boundaries as far as the applications that they're using differential privacy for, and where they're leaning over their skis a bit as far as what kind of protection they're claiming to offer us. And then sort of what's next, what now? So it all started, the internet was born. In 1994, the cookie was implemented to track us because, marketing makes money. So they want to follow us around, see what we like, so that they can offer more relevant targeted ads to us so that we'll buy more stuff. Fast forward 2008. Google and Apple introduced the Android and Apple Store, and then basically both of those companies start tracking all of our activity inside those apps, and then they'll sell it to third-party vendors, which link that data to your cookie data that they're collecting, and so you have just this huge cornucopia of super rich information and potentially sensitive information that now these third-party vendors have access to, which is great for certain people and not so great for others. So far, it's been the Wild West in terms of privacy. No rules. It's sort of like as if healthcare didn't require physicians being licensed. It's got people open. We're just now sort of requiring that we actually do this with some intention. So fast forward 2016, the Cambridge Analytica scandal. In 2018, all of that sort of unfolded. Later that year, GDPR was introduced in the EU. So basically, there's this huge dumpster fire, and GDPR was the fire hose that they built to put it out. In 2019, then Facebook and Google settled privacy disputes for record fine dollars. And then just sort of, it just keeps going. The more information that we have, the more opportunities there are to do something kind of gnarly with it. Okay, so like I said, until now, it's been pretty much a privacy desert. Users haven't been empowered with the ability to say, no, I don't want you to know this about me. So yeah, here we are, we're sad. And then Apple comes in and sort of busts down the doors last year when, so actually in 2017, they said Safari will no longer use cookies in their browser. But then they went all the way and said, okay, apps on Apple phones we will give users the opportunities to completely block tracking and data sharing with third-party vendors. So super thrilled. Yep, everybody's really happy. And yeah, sort of, except all the other big asshole tech companies out there. So there's Apple. And well, first, Google executives have said, oh, okay, well, Apple, well, mind you, Google's business model relies on $135 billion a year in ad revenue. So now that they're not going to get as much relevant information from iOS users, of course, they're going to retort. They claim that Apple is making privacy a privilege for those people who can afford to pay a premium for their products. You got small business owners, and rightfully so. They have experienced noticeable decreases in sales as a result of the ads on Facebook, for example, being less relevant, and sales are impacted. They've had to make up for it with price increases. And of course, Facebook is super pissed because, they make I think they shovel in $115 billion a year in ad revenue. So they don't have all that lovely Apple Gold coming in anymore. So that will surely suffer. So how is the internet going to pay for itself? Well, there's one way is you could say, well, subscription fees. Of course, no one's going to pay for Google, right? Nobody's going to pay. Sure as hell, nobody's going to pay for Facebook. The alternative, you use smarter stuff to deliver targeted ads. AI, machine learning, all this, sexy, newfangled stuff that, it's sort of everybody talks about it, but nobody really knows what the hell they mean by that. So the response, okay, well, privacy overhaul from Facebook and Google. Google basically says, well, we're not stopping cookies in Chrome until we figure out how to rake this golden elsewhere. They've discussed sort of this privacy sandbox idea. I can link, actually I'll add, are we gonna post these slides anywhere to the summit? We should. Even if we don't, you can email me and ask for them and I'll include all the links and stuff. Yep, no blocking cookies till 2023. In the meantime, we're gonna hurriedly try to build this other thing that's gonna let us somehow still pull all the same shit from you, but somehow guarantee that it doesn't get into the wrong hands. And Meta launches this very beautifully designed, I have to say, privacy campaign. We can take a look at it. sort of small. Can you see this? Yep. Okay, so look at how beautiful this is. So they list a few of the sort of real sparkly PETs that they're using. See, isn't it pretty? Got this one. This is not my favorite color scheme, but the differential privacy one's really pretty. So yeah, so differential privacy. This is their explanation of it. Basically, don't worry, everybody. We're using differential privacy. You're safe. We can collect all the sensitive data. We've protected it with this silver bullet. So they call it out. Differential privacy was introduced, by Cynthia Dwork, I think originally. She was at Microsoft at the time. She's now at Harvard, I believe. She's a super baller, really cool. But differential privacy was really the first effort and to define a mathematical notion of privacy. Originally, it was intended to be used within the setting of performing aggregated queries against a data set. And it prevents from, so its ideal use is to prevent, or is to provide individuals with, what am I looking for? The word. Basically, what am I looking for? What's the word? What am I looking for? Plausible deniability of participation in the data set. So basically, it incentivizes, or it should incentivize individuals to contribute their data, because a differentially private algorithm is going to only teach us, the same thing whether or not I agree to participate. So there's no reason why I shouldn't. So yeah, we can do all these fancy things, protecting identities and sensitive data, they say. Cool, even when data is aggravated. It's true, people can still be identified if we have a fairly intelligent intruder and they have access to the data. It's not super easy, but it's possible. In fact, all you need are some publicly available voting records. So they talk about this. This is actually a demonstrative attack performed on some medical records that were anonymized and released in the state of Massachusetts. LaTanya Sweeney did this for her thesis. She demonstrated that if anonymized data isn't necessarily anonymized, if you can link it with some external data, for example, voting records, then you can link that with, say, some sensitive hospital record data, and then the health status of, for instance, the governor of Massachusetts. She developed another privacy mechanism, or I guess k-anonymization is a quality of a data set. Another method that gets no attention anymore now that differential privacy is a new player in the game. So yeah, they removed all the personal information, all the direct identifiers from this health record data, and then just released it and assumed, hey, we'll be okay. Sweeney comes in, buys some voting records, and then links that with the health record data, and managed to, the rest of the sensitive information in the record was left completely unmasked, and then she could see basically everything she wanted to. So basically, yeah, a differentially private algorithm is supposed to give you the same analytical results, about the same analytical results, whether or not I remove a person from the data set or include them. It's done by adding some, air quotes, noise, a very particular kind of noise, and we'll talk about that later. It affects, so I really like this caveat, and we'll come back to it later. The noise can affect the data's accuracy, so just enough is added to prevent reverse engineering while preserving the underlying patterns in the data. We'll come back to this, but it's very pretty, see? Tons of differentially private algorithms. We'll come back to all of this. But I do like this. How many people steal bathrobes from hotels? I mean, they'll charge you for it, but I'm sure enough people stole them before they began charging people for them to begin charging people. But let's say somebody wants to conduct a study on hotel bathrobe theft. And so they ask a question, do you steal bathrobes from your hotel rooms? And some people might be embarrassed that they do. So in order to sort of protect such sensitive information, you can use differential privacy to assure guests or individuals in the data set, contributing to the data set, that their ass is protected, I guess. But you can imagine if it was actually a really sensitive question, like, have you ever murdered someone? Do you sell narcotics? Do you use narcotics? Do you distribute them? All the things. And they do this by, again, adding some noise to responses in a different way. Basically, they flip a coin, and with some probability, they decide that they're going to take your answer as the truthful answer. And if not, let's flip a coin, 50% probability, they're just going to use your answer, the honest one. With 50% probability, they're going to not do that. And then they're going to flip another coin, and they're going to decide whether you said yes or no, I steal bathrobes. And then because we know exactly what manipulation we've done to the data, we can back out the true proportions that we're looking for afterward, without actually being able to isolate any one individual's plausible deniability. So there's the governor. Okay, so we'll go back to the slides. Here we go. All right, so what does this actually mean? What is differential privacy? Supplies plausible deniability. So imagine this scenario. Say that we have two data sets, and we're going to call them adjacent data sets. Sometimes you'll see them called parallel data sets or neighboring data sets. Basically, data sets 1 and data sets 2 are adjacent if they differ by only one row. So here we have a data set of 6 people. I think this is a clown. Say we yank out his row, and that's data set 2. And then let's say we have an analyst, and she flips a coin, or uniformly, however, a fair coin, and decides she has some analysis that she wants to do, a query that she wants to perform on the data set. She chooses one of them at random, uniformly, performs the analysis, the query, gets the result. And then suppose that we have an adversary. And then she hands over the result and both of the data sets, and she says, okay, I'm going to do this a bunch of times. And each time, you have to decide which data set was used. Differential privacy is constructed so as to, so that an intruder can't answer that question much better than with 50% accuracy. That's the goal. So differential privacy is actually a characteristic of a mechanism, and it's always a randomized mechanism. You can prove this. And I should clarify, differential privacy is actually referred to in like the academic literature as epsilon differential privacy. Epsilon is a parameter that actually characterizes the mechanism itself. And so a mechanism K, basically a random function, provides epsilon differential privacy if for any pair of adjacent databases, those differing by a single row, and for any event in the output space of this mechanism. So basically any event, any possible result of a query. We have that the probability distributions of these things is pretty close. And in fact, it's bounded by this e to the epsilon. So it's a little easier, like what the hell does this mean, right? It's a little easier to interpret if you consider like dividing the left side by this one, so that you have the ratio of the likelihoods. So under this mechanism, the ratio of the likelihoods for data set 1 and data set 2 have to be pretty close. Basically, the answers that you'd see from the query mechanism should be the distribution of those things should be fairly, those two should be fairly close. So you can't really discriminate between those two distributions, and therefore can't discriminate between the data sets that was used as input. This epsilon parameter is a privacy parameter. It's basically a privacy budget. And you can also think about it as the potential information leakage that happens from permitting an intruder, say, have the ability to actually execute this query. So small values of epsilon indicate high security for the individuals, but it also degrades the utility of the data because there's a lot of distortion. And we'll talk about where that comes from. Large values mean that we preserve a lot of utility, but also we don't really get a whole lot of protection from it. So basically, imagine that we have two data sets, and I have this kappa function, and I query, and this guy queries. Let's say he can actually dictate the input. So we're going to do this, we're going to use that differentially private mechanism, execute the query on the full data set. We'll just do this a bunch of times. And so we'll have a bunch of results. And we'll do the same thing for the data set with bozo omitted. And then we have the results for that. Differential privacy, so as long as epsilon is small, things are private, then these outputs should look, if I were to plot a histogram of these ones and a histogram of these ones, then they would look pretty much, they would be close. Okay, so big asshole tech leaning over their skis again. We've already talked about that, but a little bit, and we'll go back to little bits and pieces and claims that they make in there. But where is differential privacy good, and where are people today now stretching sort of the boundaries where we can safely use it and still guarantee privacy? So one way of implementing differential privacy is via the Laplace mechanism. So this is the density of the Laplace distribution with various means and variances. So basically, what happens is adversary is querying a database. He says, okay, I have this query function, and I want you to give me the answer. And instead of giving him the real answer, we're going to give him the actual value of the query function, but we're just going to add some noise. And the noise, it can be shown. So this mechanism supplies differential privacy, epsilon differential privacy, and the scale of this noise depends on both the query and the privacy budget. So if you go back here, basically how fat these tails wind up being is dictated by not only the privacy budget, but also the query itself. So, and this delta Q is called the sensitivity of a function. So how do we define this? Let me see here. Okay, so the sensitivity of a function is the largest difference between the query result over any two neighboring data sets. So let's look at a couple examples for now. All right, so let's run this and I'll just show you how it works. There's this. All right, so we have this data set. It's got some PII in it, a bunch of stuff. We've also got sort of this high outlier. So we have something about capital gains, capital losses, salary, and we have a guy who made a shitload of money and nobody else really did. So what if we were to ask the question, how many individuals in the data set had more than $5,000 in capital gains? So the query function would be select count star from table name where capital gains greater than 5,000. What would be the biggest difference in the answer to that query if we were to remove a single person? So let's say I have a data set and I have a bunch of zeros and ones here. Yes, I made more than 5,000. No, I didn't. Yes, I did. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. And actually, we can go back here. So we have two people who made more than $5,000 in capital gains. What's the biggest possible change? So if I remove a single record that changes that count, what's the biggest change that count could be? 1, because you're just taking out one person, right? And if we take out, so let's say, Earhart, then the query result will return 1. So for count queries in general, the sensitivity of a function is strictly 1, which is nice because it doesn't matter what the count query is for. Then we have a set sensitivity. The same does not necessarily apply for every kind of query. So let's see. So our sensitivity for a count query is 1. And let's say that we want to guarantee a lot of privacy for individuals. So we're going to set epsilon, our privacy budget, to be very small. And so let's generate what the distribution of the query results look like with Earhart in the data set and without. So basically, the distribution of those outputs with a guy of interest removed. And so I'm just taking, basically this is, oops, this should be 1. Let's run this guy. So these guys overlap a lot. There's not a whole lot of distinguishability between the distribution of the query results, the random query results, whether Earhart is included or not. Which means that we didn't really learn anything extra from Earhart being included in the data, and therefore it should provide some sense of protection or, something warm and fuzzy. Okay, but what if we want to execute a different kind of query? What if we want to know, so basically what we need to be careful for is using differential privacy for non-aggregate queries. View. Okay, so i.e. the release of microdata. So basically, tell me the specific value or a specific, tell me the specific value of a column in the database for a single user. That would be an example of what we'd call an identity query. It's not an aggregate query. What happens then? So let's use super nice. So for identity queries, so DeWork has this wonderful, like the seminal text called the algorithmic foundations of differential privacy. It's free. You can, I'll link it too. I'll provide the link on the slides. But basically in that book, she says for identity queries, don't even bother trying to protect individuals unless you're going to use an epsilon of 1 or less. So here we have, let's say, set the sensitivity to 1 because either yes, Earhart makes more than $5,000 in capital gains, or no, and we're going to use a teeny tiny epsilon so that he's protected. Well, what happens to the distribution of the real answer? So his real answer is yes, he made more than $5,000. But when we generate the differentially private query returns that are adequate for protecting privacy, then here's the distribution of them. So from this, is it easy to tell whether or not the true answer is 0 or 1? That's funny. Oh, did I run this? Not so much, right? So you get a whole lot of negative numbers, and it's because the noise that we have to supply in order to guarantee some sort of privacy for non-aggregate queries is just huge, and it destroys all the utility in the data. So that's a no-no. And we'll talk about sort of where this is happening. Additionally, there are the mathematical properties of differential privacy, they work out really nicely. You can prove all of this stuff. So let's say that at time 1, adversary wants to execute a query, and we return answers that provide epsilon 1 differential privacy. At time 2, he does the same thing, maybe a different epsilon parameter, and over time. So instead of, let's say that we want to guarantee some sort of privacy for this set of queries. The problem is that the privacy budget for sequential queries on the same data sets is additive. So the more queries I execute, the bigger my privacy budget gets, the less privacy is supplied to the individuals in the database. So how do you get around that? Well, you could divide your privacy budget, some allotted privacy budget, let's say uniformly across all the queries that you want, and then use that as your new epsilon. So shrinking the privacy budget even more, and potentially just wrecking the utility of your data. So that's one drawback to differential privacy, is that it assumes that all of the records in the database are independent. But let's take, for example, I don't know, you have an Apple Watch, and who can't work out unless they've turned on the workout app, and you have to measure the calories. You have to. Yeah, it just doesn't count. It doesn't happen if you didn't do it. And if you're going out for a walk, I want those steps to count. So your watch is continuously measuring stuff all day, every day, 7 days a week. How many measurements do you think that I have no idea. I don't even want to know. So effectively, if you want to be able to provide differential privacy over time, infinitely many times, there's no way to do it and guarantee any privacy, because your privacy budget has to be your privacy budget will explode pretty much. So either you completely destroy the analytical utility of the data by, keeping epsilon the same, but then the scale of the noise that you have to add is so big that it's of zero use to anybody who would want to analyze it. How's Big Asshole Tech getting around this? Well, Apple, I believe, applies the sequential correction, so basically dividing by the number of queries that they execute or times that they collect data. They apply this correction, but only to the data collected in a single day. And then they pretend that, so if I've standardized it and fixed it for Monday, then on Tuesday, I can just forget about all of that and pretend that nothing is dependent on between Monday and Tuesday. And then they start over, which doesn't make any sense. Your privacy budget you're actually incurring is still exploding, but they're just sort of pretending that it's not. It might make sense perhaps if you were to say, I'll apply this sequential correction to data in this time, and then pretend like that is independent of something maybe super far into the future, but dependency, especially humans, we're creatures of habit, that dependency dies pretty slowly. Google applies the sequential correction, but only to data values that it hasn't observed before. So let's say that, I don't even know, the number of times you visit a certain website in a day, or some measurement of like, how often did you share this link? It doesn't apply the correction if you've done the same thing many times in a row, which again is just, it's kind of horseshit. So basically, any kind of protection that they're claiming to provide you is not as nice as they make it sound. So recently, and again, Mac OS, Facebook, iOS, Google, they're all collecting microdata on us. So they're executing identity queries. And they're just pretending that, don't worry about it, it's differentially privatized, you're safe, we can still collect these data. But there have been some papers published and releasing the values of epsilon that they're using. And so basically, for identity queries, you want to keep epsilon to 1 or less if you want to guarantee any privacy. Anything above 5 is, certainly anything above 6 is basically useless. But Mac OS is using, in terms of privacy, preserves a lot of utility. But as far as protection goes, epsilon equals 10 in Mac OS. Google, 9, which is pretty much useless in terms of privacy of individuals. 14 in iOS 10 and up to 43 in more beta versions. Facebook recently launched this huge effort to, they just have massive ensembles of data sets, super rich. I mean, everything they collected on, specifically people were interested in, after the 2016 election, how were people spreading information or misinformation from one to another. So they had all the demographic information, and then all of the websites that they shared. And they were interested in sort of figuring out, like, what are the qualities of the people who are most likely to spread misinformation? And they released, Facebook says, okay, they're working with this organization called Social Science One. They're out of Harvard. They're going to release microdata. So basically, I have a flat table, whether it's indexed by time and user, whatever, but all of the raw data on an individual, every single row, there's nothing aggregated. And they said, okay, well, we're just going to differentially privatize everything. Safe. Everything's safe. Well, they haven't actually published what the privacy parameters were that they used. But the first couple of times that they tried to launch this effort, the analysts basically said, I can't use this data. It's analytically useless. Eventually, by the third time, so Facebook went back, did some different stuff. The first time, actually, they didn't use differential privacy. The second time they did, and still maybe even analytically more useless than the first try, that just used basically aggregated data. They just took averages of groups, and then instead of, or maybe a bucketed like ages, bucketed counts, that sort of thing. Then they used differential privacy, zero utility in the data. The third time they came back, and basically what happened was that they view. Why are you not letting me watch this? Oh, because I'm not in the right window. So yeah, they didn't release what this epsilon is, their privacy budget. Instead, they released a value for sigma squared. So again, the values, so the output that they're releasing to these social science researchers is the real value of the original data plus some noise. But instead of using Laplacian noise, which guarantees differential privacy, they used Gaussian noise, which does not provide differential privacy. It provides something called approximate differential privacy, or epsilon delta differential privacy, where delta is sort of this, it's deltas between 0 and 1, and it's sort of this measure of just a catastrophic event. Basically, all of the guarantees made by normal, so these formal bounds on the differences between the distributions of query results from between two neighbor data sets. None of that, yeah, right. And again, how the hell do we interpret that exactly? That's about as good as it gets, almost. Basically, any guarantees that we get fail with probability delta. So if sigma squared is 200, how do we know what delta is, and how do we know what epsilon is? And we don't even really quite know what, well, let's say this is 1. Can we infer the value of either one of those? It's probably been a while since like algebra 1. But we have two unknowns and one thing on the left-hand side, so that's not going to work. We don't know, which is really pretty shitty, considering just the insane amount of data that any of these researchers can just look at it no questions asked anytime they want. Yeah, so if you, sorry, I did not want to do that. So now what do we do? How many of you have opted out fully on iOS? For those of you who haven't, why not?
I open sometimes.
Oh, he opts in sometimes. In what instances? Oh, so on what apps would you be willing to just let them?
I think to me it's a combination of what kind of data they're, to the extent of how unique or how interesting or how relevant or personal it is, the frequency in which I use it, and some value of fast slash, give the little guy a chance kind of.
Oh, you want to trust the little guys.
I don't want to trust, I want to give him a chance.
Oh.
I want to make some money. I don't think I'm rational.
Having worked for a few of the little guys, I can tell you that they're really not very good. But moreover, as you scroll through this, how safe did you feel? Does this provide any kind of reassurance for you? This beautiful marketing campaign.
No, I think the truth is that Facebook is fighting an uphill battle as far as recovering.
Sure is. But let's say that this was not Facebook. Let's say this wasn't Facebook. Let's say that this was Apple or Google.
Yeah.
Would this provide some kind of reassurance?
Perhaps. Not to me because
You know the math.
I understand as our paper shows. But yeah, I think for the average educated person, probably not on Facebook, but on somewhere else. I still think, there's a
So where do we draw the line? So basically this says, oh, we've protected you.
No, and this is maybe going into other talks here and for instance here, so there's another keynote coming, but I think it's hard to have the cat watch the tree, right? In the sense that there's got to be some separation of church and state here, and it's very difficult to have somebody trust a company that is incentivized to make money out of data to also be the one implementing that. Now, if there is a regulation out there, so okay, I know banks make money out of my money, but there's enough regulations and enough procedures and enough stuff. They'd love to reach into my account and put it on the balance sheet, but they're not going to do it because they're going to cease to exist.
But wouldn't it be a funny world though if we actually did hold Facebook accountable?
Oh, we are. That's what we're going to have. I'm confident. Right,
To me, I would trust a little more just because at least
It sounds good, right? It sounds great.
it's like laying out the methodology.
But it's a lot of bullshit.
Now we know.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So now the census has come up with a new way of releasing census data, and instead of doing it the old-fashioned way that they used to, they're going to differentially privatize all of it, which is interesting. Yeah, there's a whole lot on that. But I've gone over time, so if anybody wants to chat or has feelings, feel free to contact me. I'm just at taylor@catch.com. Thank you.